This is Hannah Mala again, back with more content on ancient Egypt. This is part two of a multi-series video set. As I explained in part one, to be respectful to the ancient Egyptians, I'm going to start each of these content sessions with a prayer. I understand that not everyone in this current world has the same sensibilities, so feel free to do with this part as you wish. To the departed souls in the field of reeds who are mentioned in this content, named and unnamed, I grant you a royal offering, 1,000 loaves of bread, unlimited fowl and oxen, and 1,000 jars of beer. May you travel to and from your eternal homes, i.e., their tombs, freely forever. So, where we last left off from part one, we were talking about hieroglyphs and some of the basics and kind of how to approach them and how to start to try to read them. So this is a screenshot from that site that I showed everyone in part one, that hieroglyphic step by step. So you have that link there to the side, and these links that you'll find throughout this PowerPoint and these slides will also be in the chat or in the comment box for these videos as well, so you may access them if you feel inspired to. So when we last left off, one of the things that I was talking about in terms of, okay, how do you even start to read this, is a lot of the signs are coming from the Egyptians' natural world and the things that they saw around them, meaning that a lot of them are animals and or people. So you read into the direction those animals and or people are facing. So this is a graphic from that hieroglyphic step by step that kind of helps to illustrate that. So when you're looking at either an Egyptian text or an Egyptian object, because that's more people will probably encounter hieroglyphs in the context of objects that they see in museums, you have a couple of different ways that the text can be presented. It can be presented from right to left, from left to right, or up down, so vertical. If you are looking at text that goes this way, so across, for instance, this example here, find the animals and or people in this chunk of signs. Okay, well, you see seated person, you see different snakes, you see a bird, and if you look at all those images, they're all facing to the right. And so that's how you know you're going to start reading from the right, so at the end of the column, and end at the left. And so that's why if you look at these numbers, the numbers are the order that you read these signs in. You can also have the same general direction, so still going across, but the line or text meant to be read from left to right. So you start at the left side and you end at the right. How do you know, okay, do left to right instead of right to left? Find the direction the people and the animals or animals are facing. So you have, I think that same text with the snakes and the seated people, and at least one bird, they're all facing to the left. And so that's how you know for this line, for this chunk, you would start left and end right. So when I say read into the direction the animals and or people are facing, this is what I mean. And then you can also have text or sections of text that go up to down, so vertical. And so sometimes the question, if you have that, is okay, which vertical chunk do I start with? And again, start in the direction that the animals and or people are facing. So this is just giving you one because you would start here and go down, but if there were multiple sections of vertical text and the animals and people were all facing right, that's telling you that you start at the last section of vertical text and end with that section. Also, in part one, I talked about how hieroglyphs have multiple components in the system and kind of how they were used. One of those things that you have to know about is a function called a determinative for a word. This is also from that step-by-step site. And determinatives are, like I said, words or a sign that always comes at the end of the word, and it tells you which category or object of things that word falls into. So it's not a image or letter or picture that you read phonetically, which is why it always comes at the end, partly why it always comes at the end of the words, because determinatives sort of function like our modern day periods, because the Egyptian hieroglyph texts don't have spaces. So determinatives are one of the ways that kind of clue you into, okay, you've reached the end of a word and now we're going on to the next word. So this is some examples from that site. And all of these words here, all because each 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 of these images is one word. So the word or a word for the sun, Ra or Ray, the a word for day, hair, Ru, word for shadow, Shu. But if you look at all of these words, you'll notice that at the end of every single one of them, they have a circle with another circle inside. And that image is the determinative that in this case is following the end of each of these words. And it's a determinative that tells you that this word has something to do because it represents the sun disk. So this word, whatever it is, has something to do with the sun and its rising or light or the notion of time. So that's why I've done this first one here, because what the red line marks is the end of the phonetic elements of that word. So you have mouth or R, and then the arm sign, which I think is I or iron, which is that one. So the phonetic letters, in kind of our terms, we can liken it to, but it's not exactly the same as our modern alphabet. Part of the word that you actually read are those first two pictures. And that means the sun, as in the sun in the sky, because there's a different word for sun as in like biological relation. And that has different images. So this is just a kind of visual illustration of how determinatives work. So here you have hair through the word for, or one of the words for day. And if you look, hair Ru has three letters in the ancient Egyptian, but there's four pictures. And there's four pictures because that last picture is not the phonetic letter, it's the determinative. So you have H, R, and double U, and then the determinative. Okay. You also have something that you occasionally see in the different stages of the hieroglyphs, which is honorary transposition, which is basically when you have the images and the pictures that are depicted on the object, the more important word comes first in those images. But when you're translating the word and writing it down, it doesn't necessarily come first. So this is also a screenshot from Step by Step, and it has a honorary transposition that you see a fair amount, which is one of the terms for priest in ancient Egypt, which is hemneter. And literally translated, that phrase means servant of the god. So the of is implied, and the words that are actually present in the text are servant and God. So that's the translation part. It follows the sequence that we're used to. It makes sense. But if you look at the image, it's flipped. So the image that comes first is that nature, so that word here, which is this for God, because God is more important than in this context than the word for servant, which is hem, which is that image here. So this is a good illustration of honorary transposition, and one that, particularly if you look at objects, you will see most likely more than once. So when you translate it, it's hem necher, literally servant of the god, i.e. priest, and that hem servant of implied and then necher God. But when you look at the pictures, it's flipped. So hem, because it's servant, the less important word, is placed second, and the necher, or word for God, is placed first. Quick note on the pronunciation. I am still learning hieroglyphs, and I am not fluent at them yet, so my pronunciations will not always be correct. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then we have, going back to how I was talking about how the hieroglyphs have ideographic elements and symbolic elements. They also have phonetic elements, and those phonetic elements are, you can roughly liken them, particularly the unilateral signs, which is what this chart depicts, to our alphabet. It's not exactly the same, but it functions in roughly the same way. Which is why if you see, like, you've ever seen on social media the Egyptian alphabet charts, this is what they're drawing from, is they're drawing from the unilateral signs. And they're simplifying it because there's a few things that kind of make it function not exactly like our modern day alphabet, but it has the same basic function. So unilateral signs are called that because they just represent one phonetic sound. And there is a certain order to them. So if you learn hieroglyphs, the recommendation is to learn the unilateral, so the one sound signs, and then as well as the bilateral two sound signs, and then the trilateral three sound signs in a certain order, particularly because if you then go to a full paper dictionary of hieroglyphs, the dictionary is organized according to a certain order. And so if you memorize the phonetic signs out of order, it then becomes harder for you to use dictionaries and quickly find words. So what we have first is we have and this is the basic structure for unilaterals, bilaterals, and trilaterals, where we have the actual picture, the actual image, and then we have the transliteration. So what the the transliteration is more the part that's like our um modern day alphabet. The phonetic value is how we think it sounded, with a little bit of our modern day alphabet elements mixed in. But that's why for this first sign, the vulture, you have the transliteration be that weird, at least to us, like what looks like a backward number 3. And then the phonetic value being 2 A's, because the phonetic value is how we think that that sign was actually pronounced. And then down here, these are what Egyptologists think each of these things are actually representing. And some of them were, a little bit more firm on than others. So one of the H's here, you see that Egyptologists think that it's an animal's belly with teats, but it might not be. It might be depicting something else, but that's the kind of best guess that we have for what the image of that is actually depicting. And then we have for the unilaterals, there are two unilaterals that, depending on the context, both stand for the same phonetic sound or letter, but the picture may be different depending on the context and kind of what the text or image or object is trying to say. So the first one of those is N, which can either be, in terms of the picture or the image that you're looking at, can either be the red crown here, or it can be the what Egyptologists think is meant to represent water here. So that is why I've put the side note here. And then M, same thing again, depending on context. The image for M can either be an owl, or it can be this, which I think Egyptologists think that's like a hobbling thing. Yeah, Egypt. So the best guess of what this is supposed to represent is sorry, is a tethering rope. And this screenshot is again from that hieroglyphs step-by-step site. All right. So this is also from the step-by-step site, and it's from their dictionary tab. And I've basically pulled some words from the dictionary to try to give you some practical examples of how these different principles work in the course of like multiple of them being in operation at the same time. So first we have this word here, which is mesh-ah. Again, pronunciation is probably not all the way correct, which can be translated as the word for soldiers or army or infantry or a gang. And then they put it in parentheses here, like a gang of workmen. So not like not necessarily like a street criminal gang, but like a gang group of people that you have when you're doing construction projects. So the first thing to note about this word is they have this word here, and then they have another set of word here. So these are both, this chunk and this chunk are two different ways of, in terms of the actual pictures or images that are used, of writing that mesh ah. The second thing to note is that this is not a soldier, not an infantryman, but soldiers, an army. So it's plural, it's multiple people. And one of the tells for nouns, if they're plural, is that it's towards the end of the word, and they have these at least two, but sometimes three dashes. So these three dashes, even if you don't know exactly how to read this particular word, those three dashes are one of your clues that one of the possibilities for this word is that it's a plural noun of some kind. You also, in this case, both of these two ways of writing this, you have a determinative that is in the word. So you have mesh-ah, so this first way of writing it, you have a picture with the phonetic value of three sounds. Sorry, of three sounds, which is why there's just one picture here, because this guy that's kneeling and has some kind of weapon and something on his head, that is the mesh-ah. And then the end of the word, at the end of this way of writing the word, you have the determinative, which is a seated man. And that determinative is one of the clues that you might be dealing with an occupation or a type of job, because it's a person. And then you finally have the plural strokes. The second way of writing it, for those same three characters, mesh, ah, you have three unilaterals. 1, 2, 3. And that is a mistake. I didn't mean to put that red dividing line there, because these are the three unilaterals. So you have M, owl, esh, which I think Egyptologists, their guess is that this is meant to represent like a pool or like a basin of water. And then you have the forearm, which is that ah. So that what looks like a kind of RC just kind of dangling in the air there. And then the end of the word, you have a determinative. So in this case, this is also one of those things where you have an image that can be a unilateral, or sorry, a trilateral or a determinative. In this case, it's the determinative that also tells you and kind of clues you in this figure there. This is a career, a job of some kind. And then you have the plural strokes down here. We also have this word for lion. So one lion versus lions, plural. So again, in this case, you have one of the ways that you can write lion is using a bilateral or two sound image, which is the lion here. So ru. So this lion is that ru. And then you don't have the plural strokes, but you just have the singular stroke. So that's what that line is. That tells you whatever this word means, it's one of something. It's not plural. And in this case, there's no determinative. Then you have one of the ways that you can write lions, multiple lions, ma-e-u. Again, my pronunciation is, I don't think, fully correct. So in this case, you have these chunks that are functioning both as a unilateral, but also like a phonetic complement type thing. So you have M there, and then that vulture, which actually the M is the I there too. And then that vulture is what looks like that R number 3. And then EU, so sorry, it's EU because it goes M or ma or m, a, e, u. But for instance, if you look at the direction that all these animals or people are facing, that's one of your clues for how to read these words and in what order. So if you look at the figures here, they're both facing towards the left. So that's how you know, okay, I start here and end here. Same thing here. All of them are facing towards the left. So that's how you know, okay, I'm going to start here, there, and then this is the end of the word. And then the same thing with ma-e, is they're all facing towards the left. So that's how you know, okay, I'm going to start here, then here, then here, and end here. Or end with the phonetic parts here. And then you have the determinative part of the word, and then the plural strokes. Because again, if you look at the characters, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 pictures. Or sorry, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pictures in all. But that's how you know for the pictures in terms of where you stop your phonetic reading, you stop it here. And so this is the determinative, and then you have the plural strokes there. All right. We also have words that can be the same picture, or almost the same picture, but have different grammatical functions in a sentence. So one of the common ones that you see this is in the word neb, which can function, depending on the context, either as the noun, which can be translated as lord, master, owner, that kind of thing, or as the infinitive adjective, meaning any, all, or every. So this, in terms of the phonetic class that it falls into, this is a bilateral because it's one picture or image that stands for two phonetic sounds. Neb. So again, that neb, that kind of E that we're adding in the middle, that's added because the Egyptian hieroglyphs did not have vowels. One of the clues for, okay, are you looking at neb as a noun or as an adjective, is do you see the plural or singular strokes at the end of the word. So here, where it's functioning as a noun, you have that one stroke telling you that this is a singular, because nouns are one of the word classes that have those strokes. Adjectives don't. And so if you go to neb functioning as an infinitive adjective, meaning any or all or every, it's the same initial picture, but there's not that singular line down there. So this is where context is important, and why a general good practice is to kind of, before you even start to write the translation down, let your eye visually go over the whole thing first. And then you have this word that uses that word neb as its basic building block, but adds other things onto it. So neb is the word for a male lord, master, owner, etc. Neb it is a word that you can translate as lady or mistress. And if you look, it starts with that same bilateral neb, but it adds the bread loaf, unilateral, which is T. And the bread loaf T is feminine. And so if you want to make a word feminine, one of the things that you can do, depending on the situation, is add that feminine T at the end. So if you're looking at, say, this picture versus this picture, or this picture versus this picture, you can tell that this top one is the masculine version, Lord, Master, versus this one down here is the feminine version, lady or mistress, because it has that feminine T. Similar to the mesh'ah, these are three different ways of writing nebet, lady or mistress, in terms of the pictures or images that they actually used. So you can have neb it without any determinatives, without any plural or thing or sing or singular strokes. You can also have nebet with a determinative. So in these two cases, and again, oh, that's wax. I wanted to differentiate them. You have the neb and then the feminine T, making neb it, followed by a determinative. And then you have again neb followed by the feminine T, making neb it, followed by a determinative. I think, I don't know this for sure, but from what I understand, the kind of decision and part of the context in terms of when they would use which determinative partly was based on whether you're talking about a divine female figure or a mortal female figure. All right. And then we have pair, which is another one of those, can mean many things depending on the context of what you're looking at. So pair can function as a unilateral sound ideogram, meaning the noun for a house or a temple or a palace. So it's one picture standing for two phonetic sounds, hence the bilaterals. And if you notice, it has a singular dash. So that's one of your clues that this is maybe a noun. And if it is a noun, it's a singular noun instead of a plural noun. Then we have the another word that you can also translate as meaning a house or a sanctuary or a quarter of like a town or a settled place that uses three unilaterals and four unilaterals and a determinative. So in the determinative, in this case, it's the same picture as the pair noun. So it's this one and that one. But in this word, it's functioning as a sound ideogram or unilateral. In this context, it's that picture, that same picture or image is functioning as a determinative. So you have the or e, woo, e, t, and that the reason why those two reed leaves, because that's what Egyptologists think they are. In this case, for the phonetic value y, it's two pictures, but it functions as one letter. So even though it's two pictures, it's actually a unilateral rather than a bilateral. And then you have the determinative at the very end of the word that's not phonetically read, but gives you, okay, this is a word that is talking about some kind of building, some kind of structure thing. And then you have the plural, or one of the ways that you can write the plural for houses. So not one house, but houses. And this is another case where that pair is not functioning as a determinative. It's functioning as a bilateral because it's that PR. And then you have the R that is functioning, I think, as a phonetic complement. So straddling meant to be read phonetically, but also kind of put there for emphasis and to help you figure out and make sure you know how to read this first image here. And then you have Y and T. So this is the end of the phonetic alphabetic elements of the word. And then you have a determinative followed by the three plural strokes. This is also one of those cases where there's no clear people or animals to tell you, okay, where do I actually start to read the word? And so the thing that you can kind of look at is the reed leaves in terms of, okay, they're facing left. So that's one of your clues that you would start here, but also one of the default directions that the Egyptians could write in is starting from right to left. So if there aren't any clear peoples or animals in the word, try going from right to left first, and then if your translation doesn't make sense, then you're missing something. All right, so these are actual objects, mainly from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, that I hope illustrate some of these principles that I have been talking about. So this is a stela from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the photo is by Anna Marie Kellin. And if you look at the image, sorry, I think my computer is about to go low on battery, so I'm just going to move and plug it in. There we go. So I apologize for the slight glare. I did have to move position. So this is an object that comes from the early dynastic period. And if you look at the actual word that's on here, it is a name. And so we have R Neb. So Ren Neb, because we have Ra Neb. So in this case, you would start here and go there. Sorry, did not mean to do that. Just gotta go back to this. I lost my place a little bit, so I just need to quickly find that. Okay. Then we have this stele from the New Kingdom. And if you look at the object, this is also from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is the actual text, so the hieroglyph part. And if you look at the images, you see what looks like a foot, what looks like the foot is probably the easiest, what looks like a foot. And so all of these are facing right. So this is one of your clues that you are going to start here and end here. Sorry, I keep. And then I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to go on. Okay, so this is another stele from the New Kingdom, and I'm just going to increase the images. So if you look here, these are all hieroglyphs, but they are vertical. So they're going down. So this is a case where, okay, which vertical block do you actually start with reading? Well, they're all facing left. And so that tells you that you are going to start reading from left to right. So start here, start with this block, and end with this one. Sorry, end with this one, because that's covering it. All right. That's right. I am somewhat technologically savvy, but I am definitely not in kind of the top 10. So I apologize for when I have to redo things. And those glitches happen. So I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but I chose these stele because they do illustrate some of the things that I was talking about. This is another object that illustrates some of the principles that I have been talking about. So this is a tablet from a foundation deposit of King Mentuhotep II from the Middle Kingdom, also from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And this is a case where it's vertical up and down. So you start here and end there in terms of which direction you read these signs. But I picked this object in particular because it illustrates that example of different context of that word neb. So in this case, we have neb in this part of the inscription functioning as the noun for lord, owner, master, something along those lines. And then down here in what's called the cartouche, we have neb there functioning as part of the personal name, so closer to our alphabetic letters of Mentuhotep, because over time, Egyptian rulers acquired multiple names. So for this ruler, one of his names was Mentuhotep, the second, and that's kind of the name that he's most well known by. But one of his other names, which is the name in the cartouche here, is that Neb-Khep, or Neb-Khep-e Tre. So that Neb, that NB chunk there. So this is a really good illustration of it's the same picture, same image, but in the inscription at these two different points, it's doing two very different things. We also have a similar illustration here. So this is a scarab, which was inscribed for one of the rulers of the Middle Kingdom. So we have his personal name in this cartouche here, or sorry, yeah, Middle Kingdom, so his personal name in the cartouche here. And then on this register, on this side, we have one of the epithets that is attached to rulers that you see over and over, which translates or can translate to good or perfect God. So Nefer, Netcher. So the Netcher is that chunk there, which is one of the words for God. But then that Nefer, which is the thing that we're looking at, because that's the thing that's doing two different things in this object, depending on where you see it in this sentence. It can either be an adjective that you can translate as good or perfect, which in this chunk, that's how that Nefer, that NFR image or picture is functioning. But then you can also have Nefer, so that same picture or image function as the part of a personal name and closer to, again, what we would call our alphabetic letters, which is how that Nefer is functioning in this cartouche here. So we have Nefer, Netcher, perfect or good God. And then one of the names of this ruler, Mern, or Mer Nef Ray. So we also have, similar to what I've alluded to before, we have the same word can be depicted with different pictures depending on what word you actually want to talk about. So these are from the step-by-step site from the dictionary tab, and this is if you put in the transliteration for ba. So it can function as a verb, it can function as a noun, and it just depends on what you want to do with your sentence. This is similar in terms of why I screenshotted these from the step-by-step site and from their dictionary tab in particular. So we have pair different ways of writing the noun for house, household, temple, or palace. And then we have wob, which, depending on the context, can either be a verb meaning to serve as a priest or to make pure, or the word for a priest. I am going to end it here and hopefully come back for more of my content.